You're listening to the Play Therapy Parenting Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks.
Hi, I'm Dr. Brenna Hicks, the Kid Counselor. This is the Play Therapy Parenting Podcast, where I give you insight, awareness, and enlightenment about your parenting and your relationship with your kids. In today's episode, we are talking through what to do when your children do not respond to your play therapy skills. And that can be very frustrating. It can be difficult to navigate. And I had a listener email me and reach out about her struggles, and she gave me permission to share what's going on with you all so we can all learn together. So I will read you her email and we will talk through some strategies for when the 4 pillars don't work, when the skills that you've learned don't seem to be effective, and the troubleshooting of why, because there's always a why, as we talk about a lot, not only in children's behavior, but in the reasons why some things do not work effectively as well. So we're going to talk through all of those today after we go through Kristen's email. The path to calm, confident, and in control parenting starts now. Okay, so a huge thank you to Kristen from Utah for allowing me to share this email and talk through some of the strategies that I would use in an episode. I know that takes a lot of courage, so Kristen, thank you. So let me read you pieces of her email so that you can get a sense of what's going on, and then we'll dive into some of my thoughts and strategies there. So she says, I've listened to your podcast for several years and shared it with many people. It continues to be the most helpful parenting resource I have found. We even started our oldest daughter in play therapy locally because I love the approach I've learned through your podcast. Let me pause right there. I'm so happy, and that just brings joy to me that you think that it's the most helpful parenting resource you found. That's why I do this. For every single one of you that listen every single week, you are why this podcast exists, and it is to be a helpful parenting resource. So I'm so honored that that is what you feel. And I'm super excited that your child is in play therapy in Utah now. There are so many amazing play therapists, and so I'm so happy that you found one out there. Okay, back to her email. My parenting has improved through your podcast, and I hear you many times in my head when I'm dealing with difficult situations with my children. She has 4. They're 9, 7, 5, and 2. The question problem I still have is, I use the 4 pillars, I reflect the feelings, I set boundaries, and then I give options, but I don't feel that it helps. I keep doing it because I still believe it is the best response to not escalate a given situation, but I feel that they don't soften at all when I reflect their feeling. They don't respect the boundary, and given a choice, they choose neither and just continue their angry behavior. So I'm not sure where I'm going wrong. The older 3 all do this at different times. They get so upset, and I can see that they aren't logical anymore, but I can't have them behave in a physically hurtful or mean way. The oldest will yell things, say mean comments, etc. I'm not proud of it, but it usually ends up with me putting them in their room and holding the door shut until it de-escalates. I'm not sure what else to do. The one thing I am proud of during these fits is I remain the thermostat that I need to be. I don't react angrily. I can keep my logical brain. I try to think through what I've learned I should do, but I sit there stumped. I'm not sure. So that's the bulk of the email, but then there's one final question piece as well. So then she says, I'm not sure what to do when kids are asked to do a chore and they refuse. I try to acknowledge their state, but it doesn't help get the dishes done. Then I end up either taking something away or putting them in timeout. I can see it's not the ideal approach, but I can't figure out what to change. If you have time to give me some advice, which would send me in the right direction, it would be so helpful. So, Kristen, here is your advice shared with the world on a podcast. Thank you. So, all right, I'm going to go back, and in no prioritized order, I'm literally just going to go in order of arrival from the top of the email, and I want to share some thoughts and some recommendations and some insight about what's going on here. So the struggle, I think, to begin with, is your children are in varying ages and stages of development. And this is true for many of you all that are listening. So I happen to have it easy. I have one. So there's no other stages of development at any given time except for his. When we have a 2-year-old all the way up to a 9-year-old, we are in totally different developmental stages and different abilities to process, different abilities to understand what's going on, consider the choice, consider the limit, understand their feeling that's being reflected. So there are going to need to be age-appropriate tweaks that are made based on the age of the child. So a helpful rule of thumb is under the age of 5 should never be given more than one choice. So when we follow the process of limit setting, which the third piece of that puzzle is offer a choice. So you would only ever give one choice for 5 and under. So your youngest 2 would only be given one choice. Your 7 and 9-year-old could be given 2. It's not necessary. 1 is also fine there, but you can give 2 choices up to 10. And then 11 and up can have 3. I don't ever find that necessary, but per our suggested number of choices by age, you can give 3 to 11 and up. So I think that's a big piece of the puzzle right there. You may have to address them differently based on their ages. And so the 2 and the 5-year-old, it would be much simpler, shorter, easier to understand limit setting, choice giving, reflection of feelings. And then your 7 and 9-year-old can have a little bit more complex and detailed. Okay, so that was my first thought. Moving on, you said I use the 4 pillars. So we always have new listeners. So first of all, thank you if you're new to the Play Therapy Parenting Podcast family. Welcome. We're so glad you're here. This is, I like to refer to them as my tribe, my family. We are in this together. This is a community of people who want to be the best parents and adults who care about kids that we can be. So we're glad you're here. But if you are not familiar with the 4 pillars, if I'm saying that and you have no idea what I mean, please go back and go to the archives and listen to the 4 pillars and all of the other rules of thumb and all of the things that we've done leading up to here, because I don't have time to dive into that today. So for those of my veterans, you know what we mean when we say 4 pillars. So Kristen, when you're using those 4 pillars, you reflect the feeling, you set the boundary, I would say set the limit, and then give options, give the choices, but I don't feel like it helps. Okay, so there's 2 responses that I'd like to share with you. The first is you say, I keep doing it because I still believe it's the best response to not escalate a given situation. Yes and amen. Okay, so one of the most powerful pieces of a child-centered play therapy parenting approach is that we remain in control. We are able to respond within a framework, with a system, and we do not need to escalate, lose control, scream, get angry, get frustrated. Now, do we feel those emotions? 100% yes. However, it's so important to recognize that we are able to stay in control of ourselves when we use this system, regardless of how the child chooses to respond. Okay, so Kristen, continue to use these, and then we're going to tweak so that they are a little bit more effective with your kids. Okay, so the second thought I have is you say that it doesn't help because when you reflect their feeling, they don't soften. When you set the limit, they don't respect it. And when you give a choice, they choose neither. Okay, let's tease those apart one by one. The first, they don't soften at all when you reflect their feeling. The goal of reflecting feelings is not to get them to soften. So I want to make that very clear. It happens sometimes, and we teach that it will diffuse the intensity of the emotion at times, and it will de-escalate some of the big feelings. But the goal is not for them to soften. The goal is for them to feel heard, understood, and validated. So if they're not softening, but they are hearing you say, you're angry, you feel jealous, you're frustrated, you're upset. If they're internalizing that message, even if you don't see softening happening, you still are using the tool effectively and it is having the desired outcome. Because the goal is, I feel heard, I feel understood, I feel validated, and someone gets what's going on. So I don't feel that that is the reflecting feeling skill not working. I feel that they're just not necessarily responding in a calmer way yet. It will happen over time, I promise. So you have to trust me when I say I have children that walk into the playroom that are so dysregulated and so out of control and so upheaved and so chaotic. Sometimes it takes a very long time for them to realize that when I say, you're really angry that that toy broke, that I mean it, and that that's enough for them to be able to control themselves. Because in the end, we're reflecting feelings so that they learn emotional vocabulary and they learn emotional regulation. So it's a process. It takes time. I wish we could just have the magic pill that made it happen immediately, but it doesn't work that way. So continue to do that. It's not about them softening. It's about them feeling that you understand what's going on. Okay, so moving on. They don't respect the limit that you set. So when you say, but I'm not for hitting, or your brother is not for yelling at, or whatever limit you set, they don't respect it. Okay, so in that scenario, there needs to be a precedent set that when the behavior has already begun, that is unacceptable. So they are already hitting, they are already yelling, they are already doing something that has been predetermined and pre-established that that's not the way that behavior is acceptable in the house and the family, whatever your rules are. So when they're already at that point, you actually circumvent the reflect the feeling, set the limit, offer a choice. You actually go straight to the limit. And we don't talk about this very often because this is kind of advanced limit setting, and I try to keep things pretty basic and simple so that anyone can implement them. So I'm taking y'all to like 3.0 today. You've graduated. So when the behavior is already taking place and they are already doing something that you are not okay with and they have already been told is not appropriate, you go straight to the limit with a firmer tone to your voice. So you would say, Jack, I am not for hitting. Immediately, that's the first thing that comes out of your mouth. You, with a firm tone, very clear that you need them to listen, you set the limit. I am not for hitting. Then you immediately backpedal the tone and you go straight back into the 3 pieces of limit setting. I know that you're angry, but people are not for hitting. You can choose to tell me that you're upset, or you can choose to hit your pillow. Which do you choose? Okay, so notice the difference in effect that, Jack, I am not for hitting. I know that you're upset. Do you hear how it immediately catches their attention, makes it very clear what the limit is, but then you circle back to acknowledge the feeling, set the limit, offer the choice. Here's why we do that. Because when they are out of control, and Kristen, later in your email, I'm going to quote you directly, you say, they get so upset and I can see that they aren't logical anymore. That is exactly why we do this in this way, because they are no longer logical. So you immediately set them on track with the limit in a tone of voice that says, this is important. Because you actually have to kind of circumvent the emotion there. And then you dial it down to help them feel that you get it and give them a choice instead. So if they're not respecting the boundary, you immediately jump to the limit and then you go through the 3-step process. Now, another piece of the puzzle is if they're not respecting the boundary, they need to hear it more often, and or consequences need to be more severe. So let me talk through those 2 things. In the playroom, there are times when I have to set the limit 5, 8, 12 times before a child is able to comply. Now, In the real world, that's a little more challenging because in the playroom, I have an entire hour where there's nothing else going on. There are no other distractions, and I'm able to be patient and just sit there and let the child work through that. I know when there's a busy road, a parking lot, we have to get out the door to go somewhere. I know that there are pressures that make that a little more complicated. But when you're able to, and I know that's not an always, but when you're able to, it's extremely important to set the limit as many times as necessary until the child is able to self-regulate. Because if we step in when the child doesn't immediately respect the boundary and obey the limit, if we step in any way, so we grab their hand to stop them from hitting, we send them to their room, we put them in timeout, we take away the toy that they're not using appropriately, we separate them from their siblings when they're fighting. If we intervene, we communicate to the child, you go as far as you want to go, you push as far as you want to push, you escalate this as much as you want to escalate this, and eventually when you cannot control your behavior anymore, I will step in and control your behavior for you. And that teaches the child nothing about self-control and self-regulation. So sometimes you have to set the limit many times in a row until they're able to A, realize you're not going to change what you're saying, and B, they have a choice to make and the limit will be obeyed regardless. So it's a patience is a virtue game. And I always encourage parents in my private parent coaching and when I meet with them at my center, what I say to them is it's a power struggle and someone is always going to win and someone is always going to lose. And it should not be you. So when your child is power struggling with you, which this is a related aside, Kristen, because I want to address this as well. Everything you're describing is a power struggle. So they feel that they want more power and you're trying to take some power back. And so the control is the war being waged. So in those moments when they're not wanting to comply and they're not wanting to obey the limit and they're not respecting the boundary, recognize it for what it is. It's a power struggle. They're not being awful. They're not being atrocious. They're not being anything other than kids that always are trying to find where their level of power is. And so if you recognize it as a power struggle, you are able to, as my mother-in-law says, have the patience of Job. And you're able to say, I know that they just want power in this moment. I'm going to continue to follow this 3-step process, and I will not give in and give them the power. And then eventually they learn there's nowhere to go because you just become a broken record that says the same thing again and again and again. I know that you're angry, but I'm not for hitting. You can choose to tell me that you're upset, or you can choose to hit the pillow. And you just continue again and again and again until they realize, okay, this isn't going to work. So let me move on to the choices. So if they're given a choice, they choose neither and they continue their angry behavior. So choosing neither, I just tried to combine 2 words there. Choosing neither is not an option. So when we go through the 3-step process, we reflect their feeling, we set the limit, we give them choices. When they have been given choices, choosing neither is never an option. And if they are choosing neither, that brings us into ultimate choice giving and ultimate limit setting. So let me get there in a moment, but let me set the precedent here first. By choosing neither, that is a choice. So Kristen, I feel like you think that you're stuck because they're not choosing either option that you're giving them. And in the email you said you can choose to be angry in your room where you aren't hurting us, or you can choose to take some deep breaths, stop hitting, and continue to be in the living room with us. Okay, so you are giving choices. Let me clarify, that's really long. And if you can't say it in 10 words or less, don't say it. So that may be part of the issue, is you're using too many words and your choices are getting lost. So for all of us, it's a very helpful reminder, keep things very short. Brevity is your friend when you're talking with your kids. And if you can't say it in 10 words or less, don't say it. So you can choose to go to your room, or you can choose to stop hitting and stay here. So Much more concise is probably helpful there. But when they are choosing neither, I think you think, oh no, this isn't working. But choosing neither is also a choice. So in that scenario, you move to the ultimate limit setting and ultimate choice giving, which is your if-then statements. If you choose to hit one more time, you choose to go to your room for 10 minutes to calm down. If you choose to stop hitting right now, you choose to stay out here with us as a family. Which do you choose? And then no matter what choice is made next, if they choose to hit or not hit, your response is, you've chosen to stay out here with us as a family. Or you've chosen to go to your room for 10 minutes. Notice that all of a sudden, you have nothing to do with the outcome. All you're doing is enforcing the choice that they already chose. Because in that scenario, they're hitting, they're angry, you don't want to be around it, they're hurting their siblings, there's all of this chaos going on. It takes all the chaos out of it to say, well, let me back up, because you said they don't choose either choice. You say, not choosing is not an option. If you choose not to choose, you choose for me to choose for you. Let me say that again, because it's a lot of chooses. Not choosing is not an option. If you choose not to choose, you choose for me to choose for you. So notice that you're basically saying, this is what you have, and I'm not budging. So if you choose not to choose, you choose for me to choose for you, then means you have the luxury of saying, I see you've chosen for me to choose to put you in your room because you chose not to stop hitting. In all of these scenarios, notice that you are not the disciplinarian, you are not the enforcer, you are not the authority figure that's just mean and throwing out punishments and doling out consequences. Notice that the message that your child receives is, I chose. I chose to hit. I chose to stop hitting. I chose not to choose. I chose for mom to choose for me. I chose to go to my room. I chose to stay in the living room with my family. Notice that the self-responsibility kicks in. Kristen, what I'm hearing and what you're saying is your children have never started to understand the weight of their responsibility for the outcome. So it's really important that you're using the word choose all the time. It is not the same thing if you say, if you hit, you're going to your room. That's a threat, and kids learn nothing about self-responsibility and self-control when they're threatened. They learn that mom is mean and sends me to my room when I do things I'm not supposed to do. So if you're not using the word choose, that would be a factor. If you're saying too many words and your choices are too long and your limits are too long, that can be a factor. But at the bottom line, I always want to find the root. And the root of this to me is your children have not realized that their self-control and their self-regulation dictates everything. Because when you choose not to hit, you choose to stay out here with the family. When you choose to hit your brother, you choose to go to your room for 10 minutes. Notice that the child says, what outcome do I want more? Do I want to be in my room or do I want to be in the living room with my family? And whatever they want is what they will choose because there's self-control and self-responsibility and self-regulation. That's what we want. So let me see if there's anything else okay, so you say it usually ends up with me putting them in their room and holding the door shut until it de-escalates. I'm not sure what else to do. So now you have an option, right? So you make it very clear with your if-then choice. If you choose to stop hitting, you choose to stay out here with the family. If you choose to hit one more time, you're choosing to go to your room for 10 minutes. And then at that point, you would put them in their room if they don't go willingly. But notice that you are not, quote, putting them in their room. They are choosing to go to their room. And you say that to them. I see you've chosen to go to your room for 10 minutes. And are they going to be upset and angry and yell and do all of those things? Yes. But your response is, you wish you would have chosen not to hit. And you wish you would have chosen to stay out with the family. But you chose to hit. So you chose to go to your room. But you can try again next time. That recap is really important, y'all, because they need to have it reinforced. I chose this. This is the outcome, but I can try again. There's always another chance. So when they're fighting and yelling and angry about being in their room, you just keep reflecting that. You wish that you would have chosen not to hit. And you wish you would have chosen not to go to your room, but you can try again next time. And the lesson learned is I have control over the outcome. So it reduces the power struggle, it reduces the fight for control, and they learn self-control. That's the biggest piece of the puzzle here. And you should be extremely proud, Kristen, that during those moments you remain the thermostat. And if you don't have any frame of reference for that, that is one of my rule of thumb episodes, be a thermostat, not a thermometer. So if you need to look into that, go back in my archives. But yes, you can remain a thermostat in this scenario because it's up to them. Notice that you would have chosen for them to stop hitting. You would have chosen for them to stay in the living room with everyone else. You would have chosen for them not to go to their room, but they chose otherwise. There's freedom and peace in being able to say, I would have chosen the best things for you, but you chose differently. So that's what I suggest, recommend. Kristen, email me after you've tried some of these and let me know how it's going. I would love to hear with an update. And your final question, I'm not sure what to do when kids are asked to do a chore and they refuse. I try to reflect their feeling, but it doesn't help get the dishes done. So if then limit again. So you go with the regular limit setting. You wish you could keep playing, but it's time to do the dishes. You can choose to do the dishes right now, or you can choose to do the dishes in 3 minutes. Which do you choose? For your older kids. For your younger kids, you can choose for me to help you, or you can choose to do it by yourself. Which do you choose? Okay, so you follow that process. There are your 3 steps for the limits. When that does not work, they ignore you, they choose not to choose, they choose not to comply. If you choose to do the dishes right now, you choose to have positive outcome later. If you choose not to do the dishes right now, you choose not to have positive outcome later. That might be dessert after dinner. That might be book time later. That might be time with your friends. That might be, for your older kids, time tomorrow. So if your 9-year-old is refusing to come in because they want to keep playing with their friends, you say, if you choose not to come in and do your chores right now, you choose not to have playtime with your friends tomorrow. But if you choose to come in right now and do your dishes, you choose to have playtime with your friends tomorrow. It has to be made very clear that doing the dishes is non-negotiable. Because again, choosing not to choose is not an option. If you choose not to come in right now, you choose for me to choose for you. And they usually don't like what you choose. So it's really important that they learn that the choices are given and there's an if-then choice that follows so that it's very clear, I'm going to choose this outcome or I'm going to choose this outcome, but the dishes are going to be done either way. That's where I think a lot of parents get stuck, is they don't know what their leverage is. And the leverage is the dishes are going to be done regardless. But the outcome is going to be different based on when you choose to do them. So if you choose to do them right now when I ask you to, positive outcome. But if you choose not to do them right now when I ask you to, you will still do them. But then there is a negative outcome as well. So it's connecting the dots for kids that they understand the chore is required regardless, but they can choose to have what they want or they can choose to lose what they want based on when they choose to obey. So Kristen, I hope you find that helpful. I hope all of you find that helpful because we all struggle. My husband and I talk all the time that in the moment, it's hard to remember these. And Kristen, it makes me laugh because you said, I always hear you in my head. And so many parents say that to me, which that kind of weirds me out, quite honestly. I'm always like, hear you in your head, don't hear me in your head. But I understand what you're saying. I mean, you have me as a coach, right? And so the coach is going, come on, this is what you need to do. But in the moment, it's hard. And so we have to fall back on our framework. We have to fall back on the process. And that's why I love child-centered play therapy, because it gives you everything you need. You just have to make tweaks and implement as kids grow, as they change, as they develop, and those kinds of things. So I hope that all of us are encouraged this week. Challenge yourself to be diligent with using your skills, even when you know them, even when you've practiced them. Dive in deeper and figure out how to use them more consistently, more effectively. It's a powerful thing when your kids know what to expect. They know what you're going to say. They know how you're going to respond. Consistency is key for parenting because consistency provides stability and stability provides security. And you want secure relationships with your kids because, as always, the number one priority of everything we do, every episode, every skill, every principle, why? What do we do? Because of the relationship. We want to preserve the relationship. And when we are consistent and when we are calm and when we are kind and when we are respectful and when we have a framework, it allows us to be the best versions of parents and caregivers that we can be. And that's what we're striving for. So even when our kids are going crazy, we say, I know what I need to do. I know the best way I can handle this. I know how I should react. And then we follow the system. So Kristen, I so greatly appreciate you sending me an email. I'm going to give you access to my entire suite of online trainings as a thank you for allowing me to share this on the air. So you'll have access to a lot more trainings, a lot more videos. Hopefully you will find those helpful. For the rest of us, keep fighting even when it's hard, and realize that with consistency and with practice, everyone gets in the groove and it works. Sometimes it just takes longer than others, and sometimes it takes some tweaks. But don't give up. Be encouraged. There's always room for improvement. There's always room for growth, and that's what we're striving for. Thank you, as always, for being a part of the Play Therapy Parenting Podcast family. If you want to shoot me an email, brenna@thekidcounselor.com. And if you haven't already, go to playtherapypodcast.com. That is where you will find the archives as well as the ability to sign up for my newsletter. I will talk to you again soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Play Therapy Parenting Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks. For more episodes and to subscribe to our newsletter, please go to www.playtherapyparenting.com.